Hey folks, we're back again with the Retro Rides podcast. Been a few years, 4 years maybe, since we last did one of these, and we're starting back up with what we used to do, which was me and Simon chatting about a subject, but we have interviews coming up already in the bag, so they will definitely happen. And today we are going to talk about the history of retro rides, which was Simon's idea, which he'll tell us why we're doing that in a minute. But here's Simon. Hello, Simon.
Hello. Here I am.
Yeah. So why do you want to tell people about the history of retro rides here, Simon?
I don't know. It's a long time ago. When did it, 2004 was it that retro rides started?
2004, 16th of February 2004. I guess there's probably between then and now, there's probably a fair few people that don't know much about the origins of this thing.
Yeah.
And in various formats of connecting with retro rides nowadays. So yeah, perhaps a worthy refresher.
If we were to start at the start, I would say that the start was actually on an entirely different forum, in a different platform. We were on a different forum, you and I.
Yes, no, it was we kind of co-opted Volksworld.
Yeah.
Shout out to Brian Burrows. We were kind of talking about things that weren't Volkswagens on there.
Specifically, the ones I remember were the Impala thread. I've always been a multi-mark kind of guy, and there's obviously a lot of sort of crossover with scenes, and a lot of people who like the Beatles and campers and stuff also like hot rods and American cars and good old classic stuff. And I do remember the Impala thread was one of my favourites, and you just find pictures of Impalas over big billet wheels or low riders and stuff like that, and topped it up. And I always feel a bit guilty that we bought so much non-Volkswagen stuff to what was essentially a Volkszone.
Did you have a VW at the time?
I think I had a Type 25 when I was on there, because I was on the old Just Campers forum as well when I had a Type 25, not unlike the one that's on my driveway right now. And I had a Beetle as well, where I got in some sort of swap deal whilst I was on Volkszone. But I've always been on the outskirts of the Volkswagen scene, even when I was running the VW company thing, the Raving Mad, and I was running a Skoda, but I kind of was just one of the VW guys, and I still am in a way.
Yeah. Well, you're a member of a VW club and everything.
Yeah, shout out to the paint scrapers, massive. Yeah,
in it,
whatever that is.
I had at the time, I'm trying to think, I had 1972 camper van, which I bought from FBI VW in Swansea when I moved to Swansea.
I remember that.
FBI VW are on Instagram, and I actually found them on Instagram the other day, and they're still importing cool cars at reasonable prices, so go check those guys out. They seem like good guys still. And my wife was driving a 66 Beetle, purple, lowered, I think 1600 motor with twin Webers, like big Webers on it.
I actually didn't know that. I didn't.
Yeah, I've never seen
quick pictures of said beast.
Probably not. I've discovered the other day that I take no photos of any of my cars. I don't have any of them.
Well done.
I have to go and look for other people's photos of my cars.
Yes.
But yeah, that Beetle still exists. But it was hellaciously quick for a small Beetle, and she drove that for a while, but it did break down quite a lot because it's a VW, and VWs are terrible cars.
No, they're reliable. Remember the adverts?
Yes, the adverts told you. And my camper van was probably more car than I could cope with, but I wanted one. I used it as a daily driver for a lot of the time, and it gradually kind of got worse and worse and worse, and the brakes were binding, and it was running on 3 cylinders half the time, and that was really poor. And I eventually literally just gave that car to my dad and said, if you want it, you can have it.
I thought it went to you. What did your dad do with it?
My dad spent a year and a half fixing it up.
Wow.
He took the engine out, did some rust repairs. It wasn't too bad on rust, actually. It was a pretty solid van. Did the brakes, got it mechanically really sorted, and then sold it. So
gave you the money?
Put the money. Of course not.
No.
I did literally give my dad my van. It was that, or I very nearly swapped that with Botch, I think.
Right.
Weirdly, or for like that 912. I was talking to whoever had that 912. So Paul Botch Venice had a matte blacked Porsche 912, and it ended up in Wales without an engine.
Right.
And I was talking about maybe swapping that for my somewhat dilapidated camper van.
I have
I'm
to
glad
say,
I didn't. I could have put an engine in it.
It sounds like you've come out really well from this, because you had a camper van and they've got no value even today. They're not worth anything, those camper vans, and you nearly swapped it for a Porsche 912. Again, a car with no following or value or anything. Neither of those cars were. I think you did really well. So essentially, you had the camper van and you gave it away. You've saved yourself all sorts of riches.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it would have been almost embarrassing to have still had a camper van that was worth anything, and a Porsche that would be worth a small fortune now.
It'd be awful.
It's not me, right?
No, that's right. Why would you want to have such desirable things in your life?
I'd rather just hemorrhage money into a Datsun that's worth nothing.
Without a doubt. Although Datsuns are worth something.
Not my one.
It's better than it used
See,
to
what
be.
What I could have done is I could have bought a Laurel or a Skyline when I bought my Datsun Sunny.
Yeah.
But what I'd bought was a Datsun Sunny.
You couldn't have predicted that, though, could you?
No, probably not.
No,
but
I don't know how you could.
At the same time, the one Datsun that's still not worth a whole lot of money is the one I own. So this should tell you, people, don't ever buy the same car as me. I choose poorly. I'm going to let my wife choose my cars from now on, which is what I did with my the Porsche, and that seems to have worked out quite well.
She had a Beetle, so that's definitely a good choice. So we're on Volkswagen.
Sorry, we were on Volkswagen.
On Volkszone.
Sorry. Legitimately,
we're on Volkszone, and we're having great fun doing Volkswagen-y things, but also twisting the boundaries a little bit and posting about all sorts of other stuff.
Well, what's worth noting here is both of us have a non-VW history. I mean, you were like part of the VW scene, but you had. I mean, you were. I always call him scrapping scraps, but I always think it's probably scraping scraps.
Scraping scraps. But there's one P there. Yeah.
And I'm dyslexic. That's fine. And it's exciting. And words are an adventure. And you were like kind of sort of semi with those guys as well, because I know he was around on Volkszone, and they weren't really VW people. It's just kind of where we ended up, right?
No, I sold him a Skoda. He had a friend called Martin. We were out to talk about this old stuff. I think it sounds fair. And I was driving to Run to the Sun in, I don't know, 1990 or something, in my old yellow Skoda S110R. At the time,
also a car worth nothing now.
Oh yeah, nothing. Why would we want to keep that? There was seven left in the country at the time, so no value at all. I think I paid 400 quid for it. Anyway, and I was driving that, and that was lowered a lot using the cut spring method. Not that I do that. And I was driving that down to Run to the Sun. In fact, for Raving Mad stuff, we were going down there to promote something Santa Poddy or Raving Maddy or something like that. It was kind of like an expenses paid trip. And I was going down there, and we pulled up at one of the services on the journey. And as I was driving like out of the services, a guy just jumped out on me and pointed at the car and said Skoda S110R. And in reality, anyone who knew that piece of information was pretty high up on the I'm a car enthusiast ladder at the time, because Skodas were the butt of all jokes. They were all the Skoda jokes were just like mainstream stuff, and rear engine Skodas were not looked at fondly, and they hadn't had the partnership with Volkswagen at the time, or it was right on the edge of it. So Skodas were naff, and anyone who knew obscure coupe Skodas were pretty cool. And so I think I must have chatted to him there, just because it was like, there's someone who knows what this car is. And then he was friends with Christoph, Scraping Scrap, and Scraping Scrap ended up buying another Skoda off me, an old Rapid, which I'd semi put in a twin cam Fiat engine, but it was unfinished. And he actually did more, I think, on my driveway to finish it than I'd done in about 2 years just to take it away. But basically, Martin and Christoph were pretty firm friends in real life, despite distances, by the time we were all on Volkszone. Yeah, but I didn't know you, realistically.
No, you didn't know me at all.
Just a name on a screen until I think did you send me a PM or something saying, I've got this idea? Yeah, I do think I have some memory of you sending me like a PM or something and saying, I'm thinking of starting another thing, so we can take our stuff elsewhere, not to really save Volkszone from us, rather than set up
pretty much
a different thing. Like, it wasn't like supposed to be a competition.
Well, So what's there is similar to you in that I'm not a VW person through and through. My dad had VWs and used to buy Volksworld occasionally. Ooh. But would also buy Street Machine and car conversions.
Yes.
And most weekends we were entertained by going to Brands Hatch, which was our local racing circuit, to go and watch motorsport. But we'd also go to the odd classic car show, and we went up to Earl's Court for the big car shows and stuff like that. So my kind of history with cars was always not one thing or another. So I never really just dive down the path of racing cars or hot rods or just VW. So it was all over the place already. And then what happened, must have been late 2003, early 2004? Actually, no, it must have been late 2003. Retro Cars magazine appeared. And that kind of defined fairly well it was like all of the stuff I was interested in at the time, that it had, like, the first issue had VW Beetles and stuff in it, and had Fords in it, and it had racing cars in it, but it also had cars that just looked nice, and engine swaps, and lots of stuff that just wasn't getting covered elsewhere.
Yeah.
And may or may not have had some sort of fledgling thing in Street Machine, but Street Machine and Custom Car was still very much American focused, and or seemed that way. Like, I know they definitely had sort of Brit rods and things in there, but they were much more rod than they were.
But Street Machine had gone from being they were doing quite a sort of like a good mix of hot rods and just sort of cool stuff that people were doing, and then it got really American car-y. In fact, it merged with American Car World.
Yeah, turned into it, didn't it?
In like 2002. And by 2004, it was American Car World. So realistically, Street Machine was lost. And I do remember in the early days of the forum that we talked about Street Machine as being like a past tense thing. It wasn't like this is happening in Street Machine. It was like, I used to love Street Machine back in like 1990 and stuff like that. Street Machine was full of pink stuff and graphics and cheap cars made low and all the stuff I love.
That's the thing is, and Custom Car was, like, as its name would imply, much more. Always seemed much more. No disrespect to Street Machine because it was at street level, but like Custom Car seemed that little slightly higher end, that kind of slightly more expensive build, slightly more unobtainable, at least to us at the time, who were just burning around in £500 cars, just trying to
Custom Car turned into what it is now, I suppose, which is essentially a hot rod magazine. And Street Machine was trying not to just be Custom Car, I'm guessing. It was in '79 when it was released. It just sort of jumped right in, almost as a sort of a Max Power type thing, and then sort of just turned more hot roddy. And then I guess it just didn't want to be as hot roddy as Custom Car did in the end. But they've all been through their good times and their bad times.
I think that's fairly true. And so anyway, into that kind of weird void, because Max Power was finally mercifully dying a death. Yeah, and it
was a bad time for those sort of custom cars. That was arches and stereos and strange questions at cruise nights. Yes.
Yeah. if you weren't into that thing, it was not a good time to be a car enthusiast.
No.
But out of that sort of hole in the car culture came retro cars, and it was absolutely perfect for a certain demographic of people, because it was unapologetically about this weird sort of side world of cars. And I think actually sort of in the months after Retro Rides had formed and we'd gone to the very first retro car show, it's your statement that these are the cars that were just sort of littering corners of fields at other events, and it finally brought them all together. So,
I did. I remember saying that quote. In fact, I was thinking of it myself when you said it, which is weird. I remember going to the retro show at Santa Pod, and previously you'd go to hot rod shows and you'd look in the car park and you'd find like lowered Triumph Heralds, or you'd find some weird 2CVs, or just like all sorts of strange stuff, or Avengers, and stuff like that. And so things that didn't have a home anywhere else. So you'd go to Bromley Pageant, and then you'd see, there's like a really cool little Morris Minor that's just sitting there, or a Standard 10, or just any number of like just really cool little cars that weren't really good enough to feature, or fitted enough to be featured in Custom Car or Street Machine or Max Power or Practical Classics or any of those. And then retro
just
cars
didn't fit in anywhere.
Boom. Yeah, Simon Woolley, isn't it? The original retro car.
Yeah, Simon Woolley was is our Lord and Saviour.
Indeed.
I should get him on the podcast at some point.
We will.
He'll probably downplay his involvement because he always does.
Yeah.
But that popped up. So I knew kind of there was probably, if there was a magazine for it, there was more than just thee and me and a handful of others that were interested.
Yeah.
And I think PM'd you on Volt Zone and Darren W as well.
Yes.
And said, because he was talking to us a lot about other stuff. And we were kind of not. I never got told off for it, but I did feel a bit guilty. We were invading their VW forum.
I think that's it. They're all really popular, but the last thing you want is for a thread about Datsuns to be above a look at my cool Beetle thread.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like someone sticking up a thread about the launch of the new Audi estate and it being the most popular thread on Retro Rides. It would. Yeah. It's not a bad thing per se, but it would be quite annoying because that's not what it's there for. I was starting to think I should do something about it because I had a history of online communities sort of generally, like from way back before the World Wide Web existed. I was on internet relay chat with various people and bulletin boards and all that stuff, so I kind of knew my way around this sort of thing. Yeah. And then I said I was going to start it, and then I think I put up a thread saying I'm going to start this thing, but I don't have a name for it. And interestingly, I think it was Stussy on
there's a
Volts.
name. Yeah.
There's a name.
Yeah.
They said, I own this domain called Retro Rides. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah, all right. And then I don't even know if I got it. I'm trying to remember now. I think I did.
Well, you were Retro Rides for a little while.
Yeah, we got it. I'm just trying to remember if she had. I think it's a she. Is Stussy a she? I don't know.
I was thinking the same thing myself. I feel like I do know them, but I've.
I do know. Yeah,
if you're listening, Stussy, I'm so sorry. We've forgotten you whilst remembering you.
Yeah, yes. we are ancient and old, and we've forgotten things. But,
I'm forgetting so much more these days.
That's fine.
I'm so old.
I can use actual gender neutral pronouns and everything. So they had. They had this domain, which was I think they had retro-rides.com, which is then what I got from them. In either way, the name Retro Rides came from them.
Yeah.
And I think initially I didn't want to splash out for a whole hosting package because hosting packages used to be crazy expensive for any kind of thing where you had interactive stuff like forums and stuff like that. So that's when I went to ProBoards because they did a free forum, and that's where retrorides.proboards.com came from. And that was that would have been February 16th, 2004, because I only know that date because I put up the first post and said welcome, etc., etc., etc. And then I think that's when I sent the invite to you, Darren W, to be mods to help me promote it. I think maybe, And then it got spread around. And the thing was, because we were talking about this stuff on Vault Zone, I figured there were going to be other people talking about this stuff on other forums.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind, like, this is pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter, pre-Instagram. Like, the only place to talk cars was forums.
Yeah. Or
so
at car
we
shows.
had to go or at car shows.
Yeah.
And we had to go and find all of these people. And I found I think I found a mini forum. I found a few other bits and pieces. And I just sort of put up posts going, hey, come to my forum. Which now I think about it is probably quite rude. But,
people have done that on our forum, and it's not a nice feeling, really, is it? It's why are you doing that? Although we have had people on our forum trying to start retro cars forums, and you're like, oh, hang on a minute. But I suppose,
that's the thing. My thought was
enough.
always, like, wherever we went to say, hey, we're doing this thing, it was always the express that, like, it might have a crossover with you, but it's not a mini forum.
Yeah.
It's not a VW forum. It's not a Ford forum. It is its own thing where all of this stuff is acceptable. And I think we did all right out of that. We got sort of our initial few members, and then just kind of kept rolling. And it's interesting that there's some people from that first wave, like before even the shows where we got word of mouth going out.
Yeah.
Those first wave people are still floating around, which is why I kind of expect people to know all this history, because a lot of people were kind of already there.
Yeah.
But actually, when I look at it, we get kind of about 4,000 users a month on the forum, and they definitely not all of those 4,000 were the first 4,000 people on the site.
No.
So,
I was trying to remember it just now when you were talking about, like, the first day or 2 days of the forum. I don't know what number I am, but, like, Darren W is like number 2 or something, isn't he, in terms of forum numbers?
I can find out actually.
I think someone random was like, I don't know. Are you number 1? You're not. Doesn't count, does it?
I'm number 1.
All right, there you go.
That which should come as a surprise to no one.
No.
I'm number 1, and I think
not just at Retro Rides Forum, just generally.
Yeah, just generally in life. Number 2, weirdly, this is the really interesting thing about this. Number 2 is a guy called Rookie,
right,
who is from Göteborg in Sweden.
Wow.
So on the very first day of the forum, he came in and posted a bunch of stuff, and then sort of disappeared. But that was from Sweden, and again, I think that was kind of via Voltwell. But then we got Race Imps is the third one.
Ah,
guy called Todsky from Australia. No idea where I picked him up from. Another Australian guy, and then Darren W's number 6.
I knew he was a low number. Yeah,
so,
and I'm probably not.
Retros,
I think I'm like 100 or something.
Let's find out. So yeah, Retro Steve was definitely a Volksworldy person.
Yeah.
Oh, you're number 10.
Oh, that's not bad, is it? Oh, that's better than I thought. I feel quite privileged. I think that's only. I mean, it's only just generally like at what point in the day I saw it to just go and sign
pretty
up.
Much.
Had I known.
You were there. You were there on the second day. Actually, you're at 9:00 on the second day.
Does that mean you only had 9 members on the first day? That's
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, slow start for what became a big thing.
Well, I set it up at midday on the first day, and then I think I had 3 members, and then the second day it started to pick up more. I suspect what I did was I don't understand how that Rookie guy was number 2 in that case.
He just stumbled across it. He's probably looking to buy the domain name for something, and was seeing what it was and just signed up anyway. Yeah, he probably wanted to get it for his old bicycle forum or something like that.
That's what we get mistaken for quite often.
Yeah, that's it. It's rides, isn't it? Rides.
Yeah, rides. Got wheels. But that, and we get constantly confused with Retro Cars magazine.
Yes.
And still, like even now, like when I was trying to launch that magazine over Christmas, people are like, "I'm already a subscriber." It's like, no, it's different. It's not that.
You're not. That's it. So I'm just trying to think what I was driving at the time, and I'm pretty sure that I'd bought my Cressida before it started. So I sort of joined Retro Rides with the Cressida. So
I thought you got the Cressida fairly early on. I didn't think you had the Cressida.
I think it might be all of, sort of around the same time. What I do know,
I think it
is that when
you came to the first show with it.
Yeah, when I got the Cressida, I've got, as you know, I've got like a stupid knowledge of cars that everyone else forgets about and stuff. And I remembered seeing Cressidas when I was a bit younger. They weren't that popular when I got my one. And I'd seen them around, and I've this mental note I always put in my head from when I was like, even when I was like 4 and 5 and 6 and stuff, I'd see cars and I think, well, that's a bit cool. I like that one, regardless of whether it would be considered cool by normal people. And a Cressida was always at the back of my head as one of those cars I'd love to have. And one turned up, and I picked it up incredibly cheaply, as we know, £500, and it was a good one. But I picked it up as just an interesting shaped car, not as a Japanese car, which obviously became a very much big part of the whole retro ride scene, or the retro scene worldwide.
So what was interesting with that was we had a Datsun 510 thread like within the first week of the forum.
Yes.
Mainly because of Brian F's rotary powered yellow monster.
Yeah, that was a thing. That was one of the first things I found when I actually got online. When they were free serve and signed up. And one of the first early instances of just having a web page and being a car enthusiast was Brian F's 510, and the whole 510 scene was just like, hang on, what's this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing, because over here, like the sort of the Datsun guys like Ratley and all that, those guys kind of predate us by a reasonable amount. So they had more knowledge on all this sort of stuff, but they were very much their own sort of insular little scene.
Yeah.
And they had their own stuff going on. So we kind of we kind of brought them into what we were doing, but we kind of just did that with everything. Like yes, we're the VW scene, but we're also the JDM scene, and we're also race cars, and we're also special saloons. We're everything, which I think was quite nice for some people. I know that there's definitely people that came into the forum and were like, "Oh, I can like more than just this one type of car." All right.
Yeah.
Then there's other people that liked loads of stuff, but then kind of spread themselves really thin over a bunch of different forums, and now they had like one place to be, which is quite pleasant.
Even today, you see people come on the forum and they'll post something, or they'll just talk about, why retro rides is interesting to them, and they genuinely didn't realise that there was all this stuff going on elsewhere. That they might have been into Fords for their whole life, and then suddenly they've seen something. I mean, I distinctly remember we used to talk about cars like Skylines, like the original Skylines, not Prince ones, the original Nissans, and people would say, "Oh, they look like Mark II Cortinas," and there was always a constant, which was a bit weird for me because I've never been that way, but that constant comparison to like a Ford equivalent. So when they'd sort of say, "Oh, look, here's a cool Viva," and they'd be like, "They're a bit like Escorts, aren't they?" Like, yeah, but they're also very much like Vivas. But I do remember that. I do remember the early days of Skylines and finding like Japanese stuff and Hot Olds Meet, and stuff like that.
So that's a weird thing, because I thought that went on for a lot longer than it did before we went out there. So I was looking at this stuff the other day.
Yeah.
I remember distinctly just finding that first set of Japanese websites, and I can't remember the very first one I found, but they all had link pages.
Yes.
And they're all completely indecipherable. Yeah, all the little web ring stuff.
Yeah.
And you couldn't there was no translation or anything at that time. You would just go onto these completely unmanageable websites, because their design, like the way they designed their sites, was completely alien as well.
Yeah.
And you just click every single link on the site until you got to some photos of some cars.
I do remember that.
And there was one in particular that was all about Soras, I think. There was a particular generation of Sora that the guy liked. But it's the generation of Sora that ended up getting sort of the whole Bozazuku treatment at the time. And we'd seen that the legendary VW Vortex thread from Daikoku Futo.
Of course, yes.
So we'd seen some of those cars, and the guy that authored that actually came on the forum, which was super cool. And then, sort of off the back of that, we started finding madder and madder cars. And we were like, really? This is a thing? Okay. And then it just got wilder and wilder and wilder. Whereas now, people know what those cars are. Like, if you put up a Bozuku car, or if you own one, people know what that is. But back then, like a Toyota Mark II with a shark nose and exhausts over the roof, like that was just the maddest thing we've ever seen, and we had no concept of what it was or why it existed. And we had to learn all that stuff. You couldn't just go on Speed Hunters or something and they'd tell you about the history of Bozuku. Like there was none of that. But that made it really exciting, and I think that that's kind of one of the things that's missing nowadays, like not just from Retro Rides but from all sorts of things. It's all so instantly accessible, and I'm not sounding like an old man, but there was a certain excitement in discovering the Manta Ray Club's website in Germany, where they'd go to the Youngtimer meet, and you'd see all these cars that, like, I'd never seen a Record coupe before. And there'd be one there slammed on wide wheels, and you'd be like, oh my god, that's amazing. There was kind of a little bit of it, that sort of excitement, which is kind of gone because everything is so accessible now. But I'm very glad we got to be a part of that, because we were discovering whole scenes, and there are still scenes out there you kind of that are a bit more localized that you discover, but because the internet is all a bit homogenous. Like you look at the Thailand JDM scene, and some of those cars are completely indistinguishable from stuff being built in Japan or New Zealand or wherever. And that's kind of great because it's international, but at the same time, it was quite good fun when you found some wacky corner of the world, like the Brazilian Rabaxido, or however you say it, cars that were like nothing else anywhere else in the world. And they weren't influenced by anything else. They were just their own thing. And I think we've lost a little bit of that. So at the time, it was, in the history of Retro Rides, that was super exciting that we were finding those things. But then I also feel partially responsible for the breaking of that, because we were the people that found a lot of this stuff.
We did find a lot of that stuff. It's you don't want to sort of do that. It's a blowing your own trumpet type of thing. But would everyone know what a Hakusuka was, or however you pronounce it, if it wasn't on Retro Rides? Obviously Japanese people would, but I talked to someone with as I said before, someone with sort of like an obscure car knowledge, and I didn't know much about them. We had a few sort of Skylines and stuff in the UK. They did exist. We did have we had a couple, but we didn't have those early ones. Yes.
No, we didn't get any of the early ones. Like if someone had said Prince Skyline to you, the 99.999% of even car enthusiasts wouldn't have known what that was.
That's right. And I mean, the first time we saw one in the flesh was at Hot Olds as we came out of that station.
So that's what I'm saying. So in February 2004, we started the forum. In 2 years later, we were standing in a parking lot outside of a sports stadium in literally the middle of nowhere in Japan, talking to people with like Shakotan cars and stuff like that.
I guess the story of how that happened, how we came to be standing there, is a bit like the story of the forum. That is, or the story of how we used to go and find stuff, because we'd found the Hot Olds meet, which kind of fitted perfectly with what we were sort of into, especially me, with having the Cressida at the time. It was a load of stuff that just sort of boxy saloon cars, Japanese cars, and we were like, these are cool, I like these, and they're all slammed, and they're all on smaller wheels, and we're just like, these are great. And we found the Hot Olds meet, and I think I remember calling you. It was one night that I just called you, and I said, look, I found this site, and I can't read any of the text, but I've kind of copied and pasted the name of where it is, and it's come up on a football site from the World Cup, from, here's my football knowledge, I don't know, 1990 or something, whenever there was a World Cup in Japan, and it tells you how to get to this stadium, which the show has. The car park is where the Hot Olds meet is there, so we could effectively get there using these directions from the BBC website. And I don't know what made us do it. But then we looked up flights and went, yeah, we can do that then.
Well, so at the time I was living in Wales and my wife was working for BA, so we got discount flight.
Did we?
Bearing in mind, dear listeners, that both Simon and I have no money at this point in our life.
No.
We were both completely brassic.
I think so.
I don't think I had the camper van at the time. I think I'd already given that to my dad because I couldn't afford the upkeep on it at all. And I had a Mark III Golf, which is what I drove to the four-door Mark III Golf, which is what I drove to the very first retro cars show in. And I gave that away as well.
Did you?
Yeah, I've never sold a car. I've basically just bought them, driven them, given them away. Hang around long enough, you can have a Volvo if you want it.
I'm waiting for the Porsche.
We'd gone. We were both kind of looking at this stuff, but it wasn't like we could just jump on a plane and go there because we did not have a lot of money. So then we were talking about it, and Charlie was able to get super cheap flights because of where she worked. And then you had a timeshare in Mallorca at the time.
This doesn't really fit with the not having any money, but there's
but like there was a reason for it.
There was a point at which I did have a little bit of money, and we'd got a timeshare thing, and we had weeks or points to use up from when we had it. Yeah, so we managed to get the hotels for sort of nothing, but yeah, I didn't pay any extra money for the hotel room there.
No. So we managed to get the hotel. We shared a hotel room, twin beds.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out.
No, I just wanted to make sure. And we flew out because we couldn't afford to do anything. We flew out on the Friday and we flew back on the Monday. So we went to Heathrow.
Yes. It was. Yeah, met at Heathrow.
Met at Heathrow. And I remember you saying this, and I felt the same. We were basically just waiting for someone to go, no, this isn't happening. This is all a joke. Yeah. Because it felt too stupid to be doing this.
There was another reason it seemed a little bit surreal, if you remember. I don't know if you're going to mention that.
Oh, what? The fact that Michael Jackson was on our plane?
Well, yeah. Well, he was at Heathrow, and then he was at Narita. So I don't know how else he could have done it.
No, and he walked past us with a blanket over his face and a child. But we were so hyped to do that flight. I remember we probably annoyed everybody by chatting all the way through it.
I can't sleep on planes. I can't sleep on planes. But we were probably saying something like, I can't wait to see a Cedric in the flesh. Even though we had Cedrics in the UK. But yeah, ridiculous. Or Mr. Ishibashi's 330. Yeah.
And we found a guy via the Oz Rotary forums, a guy called Dom, I believe, who was living in Japan teaching English.
Yeah,
Australian guy, and he said he'd show us around on the Saturday, I think it was, a Saturday evening.
Yeah.
So we land, but because of the way the time zone, we flew out on the Friday, we landed on the Saturday, I think. We had 4 hours sleep. We got up, we ate something at the Denny's opposite the hotel. We then went to meet Dom, wandered around a bit in Shibuya, did a little bit of touristy thing there. Basically just went into a magazine shop and bought armfuls of magazines. That was on the Friday night. That was right.
He took us to a restaurant that was... Yeah, it was my first experience of that Japanese thing where you have completely different things on different floors. Which really surprised me. So at the bottom there's some sort of one of those really brightly lit arcade things that everyone's in that I still don't understand. But we went in the lift and it opened up into some sort of rainforest cafe type of thing.
It was insane. It was a really nice restaurant as well, actually.
It was.
But I'd never be able to find it again, even if you paid me. I couldn't even fathom where it was.
No, it was good having a local guide. Yeah,
it was horrifically jet lagged as well.
Yeah,
and we saw a couple of cars on the street then, and then on the Saturday we confused the life out of a taxi driver by asking him to take us to what is effectively Halford's.
We did, Super Autoback hotel. I think I had it written down. Gave him a bit of paper, and we were staying in quite a posh hotel because of this timeshare thing that we swapped for. We were like in the. It was a Marriott in the centre of town, I think, and I think the usual people he picks up don't want to go to Halford's.
Yeah, we just sort of threw him a map and was like, we want to go here, and then we came back from there with armfuls of magazines
Again.
and some photos, and there was some cool stuff in the car park. And then the next day we got up at some ungodly hour, went to Tokyo. I've forgotten the name of the central station there. Oh, it's Shibuya actually.
I think it is.
And then from there we managed to get to a Shinkansen, and so we got a proper full-on Japanese experience. Got the Shinkansen out of Tokyo, halfway across the country, got on a local train to the middle of nowhere, and then we had, I think, got a second train from there. And when we were standing on that platform in the middle of nowhere, and all of the signs have changed from having Japanese and English to being just Japanese, and everyone's giving you some seriously sideways looks like, what are these idiots doing here? That's when we knew we were in Japan.
Yeah.
And then we got out the station. We started to walk up to where we wanted to go. There was a supermarket that we were going to stop in and buy some yogurt. So we did buy some yogurt, which is a joke that we never actually fulfilled because it would just be ridiculous. We did buy some other food. But as we came out, there was Hakosuka, depending on who you are, making incredible noises just going up the hill, and that was the first time I'd ever seen one in the flesh. And then there was like this sudden realization that, oh, we're here now, this is actually happening.
And we sort of walked up that hill, didn't we? And you could hear the cars, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And then to go there, and we met that other guy who was the Datsun guy.
So we met up with Jetson, who has a Skyline estate wagon thing, and I met him via BBSs. So there was, whilst we had forums and stuff, and American people tended to use forums, Japanese people had their own kind of, each site had its own BBS, which was like message response, and it was the really early days of Google Translate, and what I used to do was take English, translate it into Japanese, and then translate it back to English, and if it still made sense, I would post it up in the Japanese form on their BBS. And in this way I was chatting to Jetson, and I chatted to a chap called Tetsu Sunny. And Tetsu Sunny is the reason we know that Garushan cars are called Garushan or Grashan, and that's actually a mistranslation. They shouldn't have the U in it, but it does. Right. And anytime you see Garu, Garuchan, that's me. Basically, I'm the origin.
Like when the map companies put wrong places in, so you can trace it. That's your deliberate placement of a wrong word.
It was literally just what Google Translates came back with from the two symbols that he put in, but it's actually Grashan because it's Grand Championship put together, so the U doesn't need to be in there. But someone may well correct me on that can actually speak Japanese. But that's what I learned subsequently. Anyway, so I was talking to this guy, and he sent he couldn't be there sadly, so he sent a friend with gifts in a Japanese style, and we'd bought gifts with us. We'd actually bought Retro Cars magazine to bring it all the way back around, I gave him sort of a couple of copies of Retro Cars magazine, and I think maybe some stickers and some bits and pieces, and he then in return gave me a Nostalgic Car magazine and a Subway ring. So I have a genuine stolen Subway ring. So whilst
I remember you bringing that through X-Ray. I hadn't even thought about it.
That was the steering wheel I bought. I bought a Grant steering wheel from someone selling Moon Eyes bits because I really liked it.
But I do remember. I remember the fact that we were like, this is a Subway ring, which was all the cool thing to have hanging off the back of your Suzuki car. But I remember feeling quite different about it when we did see the X-ray, didn't we? I think we saw it go through the machine. Right. And I remember, obviously, the steering wheel was weird, but a part of a train felt suddenly a bit less appropriate because I don't suppose many people were taking Subway rings back at the time.
No, well, the thing is, what happened eventually was they became such a symbol of that whole thing that people would just sell them. Yeah. So I'm just very proud that the one I have in my car is actually proper and stolen. Good civil disobedience. And then so we did that on Sunday, and then during the middle of that we bumped into a guy called Double Clutch who actually had a website in English, but he was a Japanese gentleman. And he knew a whole bunch of people there, so he introduced us to some legendary people, which was super cool. Like like some of the cars we'd only seen on the internet, he knew the owners of, and all that kind of stuff. And then he was going back to Tokyo and invited us back with them, and we were just going to get on a train and go back. So we were like, yeah, we would. Yeah. And then they stopped in the middle of nowhere at some truck stop and did donuts in the car park in their A86.
Yeah.
Wide-bodied A86 as well. Incredible.
Advan, wasn't it? Advan livery. Oh.
That's correct. And then we went back. He dropped us back at the hotel.
Can we just say that he was in that Mazda Cosmo, wasn't he? He was in a...
No, it was a Mazda Persona.
So, yeah, it wasn't a rotary one, but it was a 4-door pillarless with, I'm sure you remember, with oscillating vents on the dashboard.
Yeah, that's correct. And the rear seats were curved and the most uncomfortable thing on earth.
Like we had a love seat.
Yeah, we had to swap halfway through the journey because it was just really uncomfortable in the back.
God, that was a good car.
That was a good time. And then, and what was great about that was when we were leaving, we were just in this traffic jam of dream cars. Like even now, like whilst I can be like, oh, you can see them everywhere on the internet. Like if you're in those traffic jams still, they're incredible. Like I went to Moon Eye's All Odds Nationals, and when we were arriving in the taxi, like there were just the cars that were going to be on show everywhere, and it was just super exciting. I get that in the UK as well. Like one of my favourite feelings is when you're on the way to a show and you see other cars that are going to go to that show.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this is this mass movement. We're all going to descend on this place and have this good time. But it was like that, but ramped up to 11 because we were in a foreign country and we were jet lagged to hell. And we're riding along with Ishibashi-san and his V8 powered air ride.
Yeah.
330, which people have subsequently copied. Like it was so iconic.
Yeah. I mean, even at the time, I think the famous picture of it underneath the Sakura, underneath the cherry blossom tree, is still was legendary then. Yeah. And it was talking about meeting your heroes. We may have been on the play with Michael Jackson, but I think we were like, yeah, Michael Jackson. But being in that car park next to those cars that we'd take out, and if there was that Charmin as well, that Daihatsu.
Yeah, the Daihatsu Charmin that everyone was talking about, and the fire engine.
The Corolla, the KE70. Yeah,
the Beams engine in it.
Yeah, that's it. And it was like walking round a pop concert where all your favourite people were just like strolling about, and you just I mean, I'm sure any car enthusiast gets this feeling, is that if what you follow is cars and not celebrities, is you're standing next to your hero, you're in fact, in our case, riding back to Japan with your heroes. Yeah. You're in a cruise. It's like being invited to the best backstage party ever. It's like
it was so cool.
Yeah,
and the thing is, and one to take away, it's not just two old men reminiscing about good times. It's like that can happen. That happens now. Like that's just the effort of going out and doing a thing. That's like making sure, I don't know, you go to, if you're a hot rod fan, or at least you got more than a passing interest in them, you go to find your way to Detroit Autorama or something and see all of these builds. There's something kind of special about it. Or go to the Peterson Museum.
Which you didn't do this year, did you? Although our last trip, you didn't do the Peter Museum. But I was next to Gypsy Rose Impala and, like, could barely speak. And the Hirohata Merc as well, which was just like, oh, my word. Yeah, in the presence of greatness.
That's it, and that's kind of what it was when we went to this thing. Like, there is something. I mean, we were the people. We are the generation of people that were finding this stuff on the internet and sharing it on the internet and experiencing it via the internet, which is what we're all doing now. But still, getting there to see it was super special. And you know, you can go out and do that already. And if there's one thing I hope Retro Rides inspires people to do, it's to go out and do stuff rather than sit indoors and talk about it. Even though I would obviously like everybody to sit indoors and talk about it afterwards. So anyway, we did this truck stop, and then we got dropped back at our hotel, And we were, as I say, we had not slept very well, very much at all. And then
I cope with that better than you do, though. Obviously.
Yeah. To be fair, and then Takayuki-san was said, "Oh, I'm going to go home now, see wife and stuff, but I'm going to go to my yard later if you want to come." And we were like, "Yeah, we do."
Yeah.
So we went and ate Denny's again because that was pretty much our staple diet. We went back into the hotel room. I think had a shower or something, and then he turned up in a Skyline, 4-door Skyline, and picked us up.
He did.
R32, and then took us over way outside of Tokyo towards one of the airports, and we were just standing in this yard at midnight, just talking to these Japanese guys about their cars. And one of them used to have a 310, and I had the 310 at the time, and he gave me his old registration document for his 310, which I still have. So I've got a Japanese Datsun 310 registration document.
Yeah, I remember the Skyline. I think was his wife's car, if I remember rightly. The Skyline it had a TV screen in it.
It had a little TV screen in it,
and it was playing. I'm not imagining this, am I? It was a bit fuzzy, the picture, but I think it had like a Fat Cat video playing.
Yeah. So
while
when
he was driving, it was so Japanese.
We pulled into the his yard.
Yeah.
And whilst he was unlocking stuff or something or setting the lights on, we were both sat in this car, very little sleep, very strange situation to be in, and we're both just silently staring at this screen in the dashboard, which had one of those Japanese game shows on it, where there's a picture of 4 people in a corner laughing at whatever the main picture is, and crazy graphics coming up, and the main picture was an overweight cat.
Yeah.
And we were just sat there for about 5 minutes just staring at this thing in silence, trying to fathom what our life had become.
Their yard was typical of one of our yards. It wasn't concreted or anything. It was some sort of sheds. I feel like it was near the airport. It would be the equivalent of having a shed in Hounslow or something, just sort of out the back, up a dirt track type thing. But there was a lot of cars listed around there, a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, I guess looking back on it now, I should have just offered to buy it all because all of it was awesome.
There was a taxi there, wasn't there? There was an old Crown taxi, I think.
Yeah.
And I wanted the sign off the top. It had a star sign on the top. God, that's a good car.
That's a funny thing, actually. When we were arriving in Tokyo, was the era of low MPVs. So they're just littered around the place with all these VIP style Esteemas and all that stuff. Previas.
We were on the coach from the airport, just travelling with allegedly normal people, and we were just 2 youngish guys as well. And I remember looking out the window, and there was just a woman driving along in a slammed Homey or something. And she was, I think her kids are in it. I think she was just doing the school run in a car that would have been a showstopper in the UK.
Yeah, nuts.
Yeah, I mean, loads of them got imported in the end, but at the time, that sort of stuff didn't really exist. Not people daily driving really cool looking things. Like the car park at Super Autobacks was just littered with really cool stuff of all eras, and so there was camper vans and Porsches and that little crepe truck.
What's interesting is at the time, I think it was because it was so alien. There was all sorts of weirdness and mystery about it, because there was loads of cars there we didn't even know what they were, or we'd only ever seen one of them, maybe on the internet or in a book somewhere or referenced by someone. And obviously the wheels, no one was really importing those wheels. No. So Ed Ratley had a page on his website of all of the wild Japanese wheels. Yeah. But hardly anyone was running them in the UK. They just knew they existed. Some people would import them occasionally. And they
certainly, it must have been the first time I'd seen a Hayashi street fin in the flesh.
Well, so there was what was the Contessa, Hino Contessa, a car again I didn't know existed before the internet.
Yeah.
And it was low. It won Nakayoshi Hot Olds Association meet, and it was low on Hayashi street fins.
It was.
But that combo of car, you'd see a picture of that now, and you'd be like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." But kind of, not to sound like too much of an old man, back then it was kind of important. It was like, "Oh my god, this thing exists!" We're aware of this now.
Even though it's not a coupe, but there's a 4-door Hino Contessa in the Science Museum.
I did not know that. That's
yeah,
incredible.
there's a big stack of cars in there. That I think there's like a 2CV in there and some iconic stuff and a Beetle. But there is a Hino Contessa, like a 4-door one, and it's built. It's always been there before we knew what they were. There we go. Yeah, we should take it and put high ashes on it.
And and then I'm trying to remember. I think I got the order right. We went out to the Hotwire shop, which was in the Lewisham of Tokyo.
That's exactly the description I was going to say. Yeah, because it just seemed really not touristy and not somewhere. It wasn't a bad area, but it was just really backstreety, and it was because it was just in a road, wasn't it? It wasn't like it was a shop, and it was blatantly a shop, but it was like in a row of like townhouses.
A bunch of townhouses, and then one of them had a what was it, Toyota Crown outside. Yeah. And then you could see that it was the Hotwire shop, and they had a stack of paper advertising for the Hot Olds meet. Yes. So I grabbed 4 or 5ve of those.
I've still got them. I'm literally I could where they are now. I could touch them if I got out of my chair. I'm going to frame them.
I'd have to climb. That's a good idea. I'd have to climb a ladder and get into my loft to find mine. But I saw them the other day because I was tidying up some boxes, and we bought some. I bought my red Hotwire T-shirt because why wouldn't I? And just bits and pieces.
Just in case people didn't realise at this point, Hotwire has been your name on the internet since the internet existed, hasn't it? So that's why we made this trip to Hotwire shop. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. My online handle, as it were, has been Hotwire since about 1991, maybe, since before the World Wide Web existed, and it might even predate that. And if anybody's curious, it comes from a book called Sinners by a author called Pat Cardigan, which is a cyberpunk novel, and I thoroughly recommend it if you want some science fiction. It's very good, although it probably feels really dated now because back then the idea of living inside a computer was a big deal, and it seems less of a big deal now.
You can imagine a world where nobody goes out and just exists online. Crazy.
Yeah, pretty much. What a wild thing.
What a wild thing. Yeah. We live in a science fiction film right now. It is just really freaky. I put the news on and it feels like the bit at the start of a film. Yeah, it's like that bit where it's like, oh, this has happened over here, and this everyone stay in your homes. You can't imagine it, can you? Just like 3 months ago.
Sounds like the exposition for a crappy sci-fi movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't watch it.
Which is why we're here talking about cars, pretty much.
Yeah.
See, anyway, that was 2006. So we went from having nothing, no forum at all. Standing in the middle of this car park in Japan in 2 years, and then out of that we met other people that had kind of done similar trips, and that was again a really interesting time. Is like you suddenly find out, oh, this guy over here had, in fact, actually VIP on the forum had been to the Crown Customs meet. I think a year before we went to Nakayoshi Hot Olds Association.
Well,
possibly
he lived in China for quite a while, and he'd made the trip from China, so that's why he'd been there. But yes,
but that was what was interesting, was you suddenly finding these people that had kind of previously done things, but there was nowhere for them to talk about it. And it's the same with the scraping scrap stuff. Is that in many ways that was kind of for the initial forum like a little bit of a benchmark of somebody just getting a car, having a bunch of fun with it, and then punting it on and someone doing something else with something else, it like that was very much the atmosphere. And we had, I think, to begin with, probably still do to a certain degree, a reputation for being cheap, because none of us that were organising the forum had any bloody money, so we were building cars kind of completely on the cheap.
I still do.
You still do. But that didn't mean that that's what we were about. That's what we were driving. We'd happily enjoy the fruits of somebody that had millions and millions of pounds to throw at their cars as well. Like that was always there, I think. But we definitely had this reputation at some point for cut springs and matte black rattle cam paint jobs. Which was like two cars on the forum that was like that.
And also, I mean, that was a weird thing. Is we ended up fighting a few of those battles, like as moderators, where people kept on saying what we were about, and it's hard to say. That's not what we're about at all. Like, I don't think any of us in the moderating team ever wanted to paint anything matte black. Like, it's like everyone's, oh, you just want to do that. Or when, in fact, it's another sort of relatively early forum thing, which was when Mike Burrows did Rusty Slamington, and I remember having to sort of, not like I was defending Rusty Slamington, not because I liked it, but because it was just a thing and there was no harm. You don't have to slag something off just because it exists. You can go, well, that's not my personal taste. But I remember having Team Blitz, if I dare mention his name, who by all accounts is a really nice chap. But on the forum, we ended up sort of like butting heads in that sort of administrator thing that I never wanted to be. That was just sort of saying, look, I'm not defending the car. I'm defending its existence. I'm not saying that you have to like it to be on the forum, because he was like, oh yeah, or whoever was always saying that these things were wrong, or everyone just loves this, and it's like, well, no, you're just imagining this because not everybody loves it. Me, for instance,
there's a confirmation bias. I think that people see something they don't like, then they see people that like it, and then they think they have to like it, and you don't have to like these things, but also you don't have to express that you don't like it. It doesn't matter. Like the fact that you don't like something doesn't matter one bit to the entire world.
Or the lack of understand that famous lack of understanding that we'd be posting these things that were really low, and then someone would come on and say, yeah, but that would never go over a speed ramp, and it's just like, well, it's not what it's for, is it?
Yeah, like, who cares? But that can't go fast. I don't care. It looks great.
Yeah, this car's rubbish because you couldn't.
And I want a car to go low.
Yeah, you couldn't do the school run in that. And it's like, well, then don't do the school run in it. It's, the concept of, I remember. Do you remember there was a Mark 1 Golf, or Rabbit technically, that had negative camber, which was it's an example of the crossovers of the scenes, but it had that massive negative camber white one, and it went to what I assume was like, I've forgotten the name of the German type show in America.
Oh, H2O, probably.
Yeah, that's what I want to say, but there's another name for it. But anyway, that show, and I remember everyone, like, people posted pictures of it, and they were like, oh, this is ridiculous, it's going to wear tyres out. And it was really hard to try and explain to people that here's a car that someone probably did trailer there just to drive down that road. And it's not going to, run over a bunch of nuns and kittens at a bus stop. It's just going to get a load of photos on the internet, and you're not supposed to look at it and go, that's impractical, or that's going to wear its tyres out, or it won't handle very well, or you've ruined it. It's just supposed to go in this time, I think, now of people building things for an Instagram picture rather than actually to drive. I suppose people understand it a bit more now, but back then, maybe. The concept of internet famous, is that what that might be? Just building
internet infamous.
Yeah, building something for one show. I mean, for years, like the Nats, the street rod Nats in the UK, people cut the roofs off Escorts and painted them pink and stuff and drove around. They were called Nats specials, but people started looking at stuff like that and going and trying and taking it seriously, as if that's just impractical. You could, and then also accusing the forum of being about things being shoddy and dangerous. And it's really hard to just sort of say, if you don't understand why someone would build something extreme, just go and buy a Focus Estate. Just, and then slam it.
So, well, from my previous experience of doing online forums and having been around a number of online forums that predated Retro Rides, there was two things that I was very sure of. One, I would not have an off-topic section because it just descends into nonsense. It becomes mum's net. And it's just horrible. And then the other thing was I kind of wanted to have positive is not the right phrase, but what I wanted to avoid was if something comes up, people just jumping on it to go, that's rubbish. Yeah. Because, as I said, there's no value in you telling me what you don't like. Like, I can sit here for probably years. I mean, you know me better than most people that are listening to this. I could sit here for many days reeling off the things I don't like in the world. Yeah. And there is no value in you knowing that, because that's not going to help you know me or find something that's going to enhance my life, because now all you know is the things I don't like.
Yeah.
But if I tell you what I really like. I really like Opel Record coupes.
Yeah.
And I've only ever seen this one. And you can go, oh, actually, I've got a bunch of photos of them, or I used to own one, or I know a friend of mine's got one, or whatever. And you can, give me a bit more information on it. That's what I was looking for, was always that. So it wasn't just someone going, oh, I like Opel Record coupes and everybody must like them. Because if I said, oh, I like Opel Record coupes on a thread on the forum and no one had replied to it, then that would just disappear and such is life.
And that positivity was a rule from day one as well. We took a lot of stick over the years for, you can't say anything bad on the forum, and it's a hard thing to defend. Also, we didn't have swearing from day one either.
Yeah.
Which people found, if they thought, well, we're all grown ups and all that sort of stuff, and it's really hard to explain.
The reason for the swearing thing was not even, because again, you know me, and I have a potty mouth, but I found that arguments on the internet, because they were inevitably going to happen, there was inevitably going to be discussion.
Yeah.
But they ramped up by a factor of 10 as soon as somebody started swearing.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I stop that, I can keep a lid on it. And also we get to be family friendly and all that stuff. But that was just a byproduct of the fact that I was trying to stop arguments getting out of hand, because as soon as people start swearing, and you see it now, like people will find a way to circumvent the swear filter. And as soon as they do, those arguments spiral straight out of control.
Yeah.
I'm completely vindicated in that regard.
But in a lot of respects, from an admin point of view, it's kind of nice to have. I'm not a great fan of rules. I wish we didn't need any of them and everyone could just be nice anyway, which is a shame when you have to sort of enforce a rule or even make up a rule to try and stop someone doing something that you shouldn't have to tell them not to do. But totally lost my track. What an idiot. I'm going to talk about the swear filter though. Do you remember some of the funny swear filter things? I wonder if it still works, that if you typed in Nigel Havers or Quavers.
Nigel Quavers.
If you put in Quavers, you get a picture of Nigel Havers come up, and it may still be there. Do you remember the lovely Cressy thing that I did once? Because we could play with a swear filter, and I thought if every time someone wrote Cressida, I could change it to lovely Cressida. It just add the word lovely in front of it, replace Cressida with lovely Cressida. And what I hadn't thought of at the time, and I think I must have done it, and then sort of walked off and come back a bit later, is the swear filter then picked up the word Cressida from the phrase lovely Cressida and then just added another lovely in front of it. And it
said lovely Cressida, wasn't it?
It said lovely Cressida. And it would just continue doing it every time someone, I don't know whether people looked at it and it changed it, or
it was when they were quoting it, I think.
Yeah, and it ended up getting a bit much. I think we had lovely Cressida, and it was just adding more lovelies every time it saw the word Cressida. We did all sorts of themed swear filters, and then eventually I saw Fantastic Mr. Fox, and everything became curse word or cuss word, except for arse, which became a picture of Fantastic Mr. Fox. Yes.
So if anybody's wondering why, if they've ever typed arse, they get a picture of a fox face, that's what it is. It's Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Also, we had a personal thing about, I think none of us liked text speak.
It was quite prevalent, and it's not anymore. But at the time, there was a period when everybody was typing just nonsense.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of text speak. Even now, I don't like it. You'll still, if you get a text from me, it will have all grammar in it. It will not have any shortenings or spelling mistakes or anything like that. I will.
Okay, boomer.
A proper text, yeah. Well, no, I don't know. I think it's just enough of that. But I remember one problem we had is because M8 mate used to turn up in these texts, which was really frustrating, and so that was in the swear filter, and it would just get changed to mate or chum or something probably humorous as a replacement. But there was, in the technical section of the forum, people were trying to write things like, oh, it's got an M8 thread on that screw, on that bolt, and I think we had to change that one, so you could probably say mate on the forum just so that the technical guys could talk about what size the seatbelt nut was or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to fiddle with that bit. But yeah,
And
it was.
do you remember? Sorry, on a similar tip, the retro racist.
Oh yeah, we had a troll for a while that was
Yeah,
we would come up and say, you know, gollywog and stuff. What a very strange thing to do with your time.
that was really weird. That it was. I didn't even know some of the things he was saying were offensive because they were so old fashioned.
Yeah.
It's like it was so weird that this guy would come on and just be really racist, in a retro way, and it made no sense at all. And
It was a very strange thing. Somebody clearly desperate for attention or mentally ill. But the thing was that I don't know if they thought it bothered us, but
No.
it's a matter of seconds to delete these things. So it's like,
I think
oh yeah, look at that, delete.
What bothered us is the fact that then people would all reply to it.
Yeah.
And there'd be we'd come to a thread of people either saying what are you talking about, or just telling the guy he wasn't very nice, and that was bothersome. And there probably still is a sticky somewhere on the forum that says "Don't feed the troll." I think
there is. Yeah, there is in the website section. But yeah, that's a strange thing to do. I mean, like that sort of admin stuff. It's fairly kind of hard baked into forums now. So if someone comes on that posts up a bunch of stuff you don't like, you can literally go to the account and go delete everything this person has ever put.
Yeah,
and that's the end of them. It takes seconds. It was very strange use of your time.
I'm right in saying that none of the moderating team, actually were on some sort of power trip. I know you like to be in control to a certain extent, but I was there for cool cars. And the last thing I want to do, I get wound up by people, and I've probably gone into a fair few arguments to try and straighten things out. But it's when you used to get accused of being a Hitler type and stuff like that, and we're not allowed to do this, and it's just look, mate, if it bothers you, leave the forum. But on the other hand, it's like when you're trying to make up rules in a for sale section that you just want to run itself. When you end up putting a deadline on something because people just didn't get it, which ends up ruling out some really cool cars that you didn't want to, but people just don't understand it, and then you're being an administrator when you're just a car enthusiast. That's the thing.
Like the best days were days when I don't have to post, don't have to do any administration. I can just go on and look at some cool cars.
Yeah.
Annoyingly, one of the problems I have nowadays is I don't really have enough time to post as much as I'd like. I keep finding cool stuff, and I make little notes to post up a thread about it, and then I don't post it. But I think that's actually massively detrimental because the whole origins of the forum, to bring it all the way back around, was setting the tone. So we kind of waxed lyrical about our Japan trip, but the whole point of that was like, just if you have the means, go and do these things because they're much better than sitting on the internet talking about them. Yeah. But when you've done them, come back and tell us about them. And that's kind of my whole thing was always about setting the tone by posting up these cars or posting up that car and having the right text around it to be like, I don't necessarily like this, but this is pretty sweet what they've done here and what they've done here. And I don't do enough of that anymore, I feel, and I feel a little bit pressurized to do it actually, but it's
a hard thing to do because people are so used to they're following a page on Facebook or a page on Instagram that's giving them kind of all the cool stuff. And I think in some ways it used to be you'd find it and you'd be the person that found it and you'd put it on a thread on the forum and everyone would go, yeah, that's cool, or find something similar or say that they know that person. And it was just really cool to find something and post it and then have a discussion about it. Whereas these days, of course, something will appear on Instagram and then an hour later another page has shared it and then another page has shared it. And I wonder if the only way to actually be part of the scene in that way that you're really part of it is to go places. There's very few things that can beat looking at a picture of a car and knowing that you've seen that you've stood next to that or talked to the owner of it. And that's not to say that all car enthusiasts have to do that, but maybe that's an ultimate goal in a time where you're sort of searching isn't enough, searching and finding and posting isn't enough because everyone's doing that now. Actually being there is something. You can't beat SEMA week when you're at SEMA. When everyone's going, wow, look at this car, and you're like, yeah, I'm next to that. Not in a show-off way, it just feels good. Like if you go on a good holiday and then that place turns up on the telly, you're like, yeah, I've been there. That's cool. I've driven over the San Fran Bridge or something. Golden Gate Bridge. We should call that.
Probably give it its correct name.
It's not a show off thing. It's a feel good thing, I think.
I think there's also something to be said for seeing things in context, but also what's around it and what's not getting on the internet. So the stuff that you're seeing on the internet from shows is maybe the standout stuff, but I also think it's why the scene has become a little bit homogenized, because you're not seeing the other stuff. You're not seeing the less internet palatable stuff, whether that's extreme, that they want to show off the extreme stuff because they know they'll get likes and comments and stuff, or whether or not that's just extremely well done for the same reason. There's going to have been, like, a car show, there'll be, even a relatively small one, there's like 400 or 500 cars, and you're going to see 6 or 7 of them because they're the ones that everyone's going to post.
Yeah.
But there might be something that really pushes your buttons in the rest of that show field. And I find that actually even with the Retro Rides events. Like, I come away from the Retro Rides events sort of remembering kind of XYZ cars, whatever we gave awards to, stuff that we considered to give awards to. But then I come back and I look through people's pictures from the events. I'm like, oh, there were like loads of people were taken with this thing, like whatever it was. And actually, if you start to look at personal pictures, so not the pictures of the big Instagram accounts, but like the pictures that somebody's decided to pick out either to share in a thread or share on their own Instagram, you often see slightly different cars. But the shows are full of those cars that might actually give you that little push to go, what I really want to do is, I don't know, two-door an MG Magnate, which is what I've become kind of obsessed with now. And that I got obsessed with doing that coming back from SEMA, just looking at some of the other cars that were there. They didn't have a two-door MG Magnate, I hated to add, but just out of looking at some of the other stuff that I didn't subsequently then see on the internet. Like, there's a BMW M1 race car at SEMA this year, and I, as far as I can tell, are the only person to have taken a photo of it, because it might as well not have existed. But there's other stuff there that everybody had a picture of. So that's kind of one of the things I think that forums are much better at still, is giving a bit more depth to a thing. It's a good place to tell a story, but it's also really good to go, actually, here's 30 pictures from this event, rather than here's my best 3 that's going to get me the maximum amount of traction on the internet. Yeah.
Well, we used to look at the the Moon Eyes event reports where they put a picture of every car. And then that's really good. And I think these days probably the only people putting up pictures of every car at the show they're doing it on their personal Facebook album or something like that. And so you're seeing sort of cherry picked, here's the one that I think will get the most likes on my Instagram, and that's not really what you want. For people who grew up going into the car park of shows that weren't for the car you went for, to try and find the cool stuff, the outliers in the scene, you're not seeing that as anywhere now unless you're going.
Pretty much. I think you get those massive Facebook albums, but Facebook is I'm going to be honest with you, is a terrible place to share your photos, and also an awful place to browse through photos. You're better off with something like Flickr or something slightly more designed for it, even Imgur or something. But you do get that. But then what happens with their algorithm is the pictures from that album that get bubbled up onto the feed are the ones that get the most likes. So again, it's kind of self-selecting. So I'm still a fan of forums for that regard, is that you can get a bit more depth. You will see other stuff that you won't see elsewhere. I mean, you just go through our readers, right? Like, there's so many cars in there that are just, I don't know, that you don't see them. Like, that they're not splashed all over the internet. They're just kind of in there doing their thing, and they're great. They're the cars that people actually own and run and build, and they're not built for a company to advertise them, and they're not built simply for the attention, although some of them are, and that's fine. It's just people building cars. So I still think forums are relevant, probably even more so in this current lockdown time than any other time, to be honest. But there's more they could be doing to be better. And I wish I had the the time to plough into to retro rides that I'd like to, but sadly I have to have a day job.
Yeah.
Even in these difficult times, I'm still working full time at my normal job, so it's frustrating. I'd like everything to be a little bit better, but
I dare think what you'd end up doing if you had the time to do it. I know you've always got plans for the forum. You're off every now and then. You're like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to launch this, and things like that.
Take over the world. But one thing I'd like to point out, actually, that I didn't touch on, the reason the forum is blue or teal is because it's apparently a calming colour. So I looked up the psychology of colours before I chose the colours on the forum. And
do you think if it was red, it would have failed, or it would have been like great? Everyone would have been more angry.
I think everyone would have been a little bit more angry. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's it. So we're back doing podcasts as well. So this is good. We're expanding back out and connecting with people in different ways. So if you're listening to this and you aren't on the forum, come swing by, have a look at it. You might hate it, but you might love it. So that's good.
That's it. Which is now, it's not retrorides.com anymore, is it? It's
retro-rides.org.
Yeah. Why is that, David?
I may or may not have had an expired credit card, and may or may not have received the email to update the credit card details, and might have lost that domain. And I could buy it back if I had $3,500.
That's it. You got ransomed, didn't you?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, but you just didn't buy it, so that's that sorted. Just enjoy your domain, you loser. That's right.
Yeah. There it is. One day maybe when I'm fabulously wealthy.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. Most people just type it in and the forum comes up. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. I like it.
I tell you one thing actually. In the intervening 5 years,
yeah,
I've not yet worked out how to end a podcast.